Welcome back, podcast fans. I'm your host, Annette Hines, and this is Parenting Impossible, the Special Needs Survival Podcast. So, for those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that I bounce back and forth between, planning for kid topics where we're mostly chatting with, family members and talking about adults with disabilities and the topics that I share, as someone who has a couple of diagnoses myself and kind of winding my way through life. Um,
Mhm.
I like to make sure that we are talking about everything and meeting the needs of the entire disability community. So today I am so excited and I'm really lucky to have Lauren Perna with me. She's amazing. And
Oh,
we've been
thank
trying to
you.
get this interview going for a while, but schedules being what they were. And last week we tried to record, but at the last minute I had to cancel because I was in the middle of a hurricane. So that was
No
fun.
worries.
So Lauren, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor.
And just to kind of jump in right away. So I
Yeah.
met Lauren because I joined this community called the Chronic Boss Collective, which Lauren is the Boston chapter leader of. And it's been amazing. I haven't been able to take advantage of like a tenth of all of the things that they offer. But as an entrepreneur, a female business leader with my own challenges, it was just earth shattering to me to have this group pop up where people who are facing challenges like me are coming together to talk about that and to meet all of the little stepping stones along that entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I could say so much more about that, but Lauren, I really would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit and tell us, kind of what do you do in your career? What do you do in your business life?
My day to day, sure. So I'm Lauren Perna. I own Lauren Perna Communications. We've been around for 4 years. I started the business after a long corporate life. I was just feeling, like there was more out there for me. So I took some time off and decided to start my own thing. Come from a long line of entrepreneurs, so I always knew it would happen. It was just kind of a matter of when and where. And
Mhm.
we help companies tell their story through content and copywriting. My main focus is life science, healthcare, mental health, game-changing entrepreneurs such as yourself. Those are all people that we tend to help. And we are doing everything from website copy to emails, social media. And one of our big things is LinkedIn because the life science industry is so heavily focused on that platform. That's kind of where we end up a lot.
Yeah.
And then on the side, I do a lot of community building for women, especially. And last year, I had the wonderful opportunity to take on a leadership role with the Chronic Boss, which is a new community started by my dear friend Lily Stairs. And just as you said, in that focused on helping business women and entrepreneurs build a community around the fact that life does look a little different when you have a chronic condition and you are trying to build a career or a business. So for me, this has always been something I'm super passionate about is talking about mental health. My diagnoses are depression, anxiety, and chronic headaches, probably all related. So for me, I always had this dream of kind of finding a community that's overlapping of that entrepreneurial components and the mental health components. So when I reconnected with Lily and she told me about her community, I was like, oh, this is perfect. And it's even more broad sweeping than I even dreamed. So just working with her has been a true dream. And like you said, there's so many offerings and so many opportunities. So it's just been beautiful.
Yeah, it really has. And I feel so lucky to have gotten in. They have a wait list going now, but I would recommend checking out the Chronic Boss Collective. It's not just in the Boston area. They have people all over and they
Exactly.
do a lot of online community building as well
Hmm.
as in-person networking too. and I don't want to call it networking because it's really a very supportive environment, although business relationships naturally form when you are, getting comfortable with other people, other
Vulnerable.
women in your circumstances. So, um, I really want to dig in today to talk to
Yeah.
you about this idea that you are so open about your mental illness and your diagnoses.
Yeah.
And it's really been something, especially with mental illness, that people have been hiding and have been running
Mhm.
from for a long time. I will tell you that personally, until I hit this age of 50, I know I don't look it, but I'm in my 50s now. I didn't feel comfortable telling people about my challenges, my ADD and my dyslexia. As an attorney, you're afraid that people are not going to want to do business with you, or
Sure.
they, are not going to really understand and accommodate. And um it's been such a road to walk, let me tell you, and I have other chronic health conditions on top of that, and it's very freeing to be able to talk about it, but still there's backlash. I mean, I
Exactly.
definitely have gotten some stuff in my community like, I'm kind of weird, like, I'm the weird one, and people are,
Oh, I would embrace that. That's amazing. I want to be the weird one.
So I know that sometimes people don't know how to take me in meetings and board meetings and things like that. But um, what really, like, what was that turning point for you where you decided to kind of out yourself and to really start talking about it? I really want to hear about that pivotal moment for you.
I know. So like I told you, our focus is life science because that's my background. I spent a decade working in the industry, and in my function, I worked with a lot of companies that were working towards really amazing therapies and drugs. I worked with a lot of advocacy organizations. I did the 5Ks, I did the walks and all the things. And when I decided to leave my longtime job that I truly loved, it was my dream job. But I just no longer was in a good mental place. So I decided to leave. And it kind of like walking out the door, I was like, what are you doing, Lauren? You spent the last decade, promoting, advocating for all these other, much more apparent illnesses, things like cancer and CF and, blood disorders.
Yeah.
Yet I never once shared my disorders, which are very real and serious. They just happen to be invisible. So it's very different. And I think that kind of was like a little bit of an eye opener, is like, wow, you just spent so long advocating for everything but mental illness.
Right.
So that was one turning point. However, when I left, I was in a really bad mental place. So I just kind of knew, I said, I'm going to talk about this one day. I'm not ready yet, but I'm going to talk about it. And it took about 2 years. I finally, I had started my business. I was feeling really great, physically and mentally. And I was inspired by a couple other boss ladies in my world that had been sharing their story, not related to mental health, just in general.
Mhm.
And I just kind of sat down one day and wrote this article. Happened to be May, which is Mental Health Month. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to share it. And I put it on Medium, which is just an open platform. And you can suggest that that your story gets promoted. So I, did all the kind of things, and I submitted it to the Mighty, which is a mental illness publication, and it got picked up. And when I shared it on my network, people were just coming out of the woodwork. I got private messages, so many comments. People were just like, wow, thank you so much for talking about this. But really, the tipping point was I got a comment on, I think it was the Mighty, I forget which place. But the person said, I was thinking of doing the worst possible thing last night, but I read your article and it changed my mind.
Oh my
So
God.
after that, I was like, well, I can't stop here. So from then on, I've just been slowly incorporating mental health advocacy kind of in my day to day. I think that mental health is part of human health. So it naturally kind of aligns with everything that we do for life science companies.
Right.
And I've just been sharing my voice a little bit more. I now have a newsletter that's called the Mentally Fit Founder newsletter on LinkedIn
I
that
love
I
that.
share. Thank you.
I love
Um, and I share on Instagram under that same moniker, the Mentally Fit Founder. So, and then the other thing is just doing things exactly like this, podcasts and
it.
speaking engagements. For me right now, it's just kind of like this passion project, and we'll see where it goes. But yeah, so
Yeah.
that was the turning point. Two turning
Wow.
points, I would say.
That's a great story. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank
Um,
you.
we are going to have in the show notes, folks, all of Lauren's contact information, but you should definitely go to her website. It's Lauren Perna. That's LaurenPerna.com, says the dyslexic. This is so
I
great.
love it. Good job.
I didn't get any of the letters mixed up. So I practiced that before we started. I
Luckily, I have
have
a
to do
short
that.
name.
So laurenperna.com, great website, beautiful pictures, love
Oh,
it.
thank you.
And
Thank you.
but speaking of that, so like I use a lot of tools to deal with my ADD and my dyslexia because I have such a demanding schedule. I'm running 3 companies and
Wow.
they're small companies, but I mean,
Yeah.
7-figure companies. So we
Amazing.
really we need our tools, right?
Yeah.
So I have now, thank God for technology. I have so many apps, I have things that take notes for me. And I have, of course, we had spell check way back when.
Oh, yeah.
But I'd love to know a little bit more about your tools for, and I know you discuss this a lot
Oh, this is
on different
good.
platforms, but for us and for our audience, being that business person running your platform, how do you take care of your health, your mental health? And,
Yeah.
what kind of warning signs do you pick up on when it's time to shift and do something different?
Yeah. So funny story, you're asking this question, and just before I use a program called Notion to organize our thoughts, my business. And there was a little tab that said Lauren's self-care routine. And I had wrote it at the beginning of the year, but I must have just forgot. So I clicked on it, and it was like, here's what Lauren needs to do weekly, daily, monthly, and yearly to maintain strong mental health. So it was like, it was honestly, it was everything I do or strive to do. But it was just really cool to have it like in a document form. It was under like, documents about our company. So it was almost like these are things that you have to do to run the business and to run yourself. Um,
Yes.
so some of those things, daily, for me, it's all about meditation, morning and night.
Okay.
I do Insight Timer. I highly recommend Insight Timer for anybody because there's so many filters, there's so many options. So if you want to hear a man's voice, a woman's voice, if you want it 5 minutes, 20 minutes, you want an hour, you want a lesson, or you'd rather just meditation, you can filter that. So I always suggest that as a good way to start, especially if you're not familiar with meditation.
Mhm.
Um, and just always, the thing I always tell people is be gracious with yourself, because if you are somebody like me who has what we call the monkey mind, constantly going, meditation is not going to come naturally to you.
Mhm.
So that's why starting with a program like Insight Timer is great. Start the day with Insight Timer, end with it. I also journal. Um,
Mhm.
I start by journaling just kind of thoughts and just kind of dumping. And then I will try and do kind of more like tailored prompts or whatnot. Not always the greatest with that because I do always have a lot to say. So by the time I'm done talking about my worries and whatnot,
Mm.
I, pretty much done writing. But yeah, and I also do a lot of CBT activities for myself when I feel the anxiety coming on really strong. I will pull out the journal and try and do things like here's what I'm feeling, here's what I know to be true. Those are all just kind of little CBT tactics that help you kind of reassess and really bring your brain back to what's the truth. If I'm feeling anxious because a client didn't read an email yet or respond to an email after a few days, I'll say something like, I'm really anxious because I didn't hear from the client and my brain is telling me this means he doesn't want to work with me. Then I will
Mm.
try and bring myself down and say, okay, it was a weekend, Lauren. It was, most people don't answer their email in 30 seconds. You don't answer every email in 30 seconds. And really just kind of bring myself back down. And that's a tactic I share with a lot of people. And I think that works really well, especially when I feel the cues coming on. For me, the cues are like, my face turns red, I'm sweating, I call it like the buzzy feeling in your veins. You can almost feel like the blood running through. Those are kind of my like physical cues. Um, so sometimes, if there's a specific thing, I will do that kind of CBT activity. But if I'm not really sure why, that's my cue to just get up, take the dog for a walk, step away from the computer. Sometimes it is just, doing some like yoga or meditation. Sometimes it's literally just like talking to my husband or something. I try to use those cues as like moments to step away, because I think sometimes if you are anxious, you do feel this compelling nature to like, okay, well, let me just figure out what the problem is. Let me just stay at my desk until the, email comes through, or, everything is going to end if I don't just finish this project. But you really have to use those cues to step away from the computer, especially as, if you're in that corporate world, or step away from your job, just step away for 5 minutes.
Mm. So
So yeah.
CBT, cognitive behavioral
Yes,
therapy.
yes, I should have explained
Don't
what that was.
um,
Yes.
and they do have lots of great tools. Do you have a journaling app that you like, or do you do pen and paper?
I'm a pen and paper kind of gal.
Nice.
Um, but if you have an iPhone, there is a journaling app that does give you prompts. I feel a little mixed about doing it digitally, just because for me, sometimes what's triggering the anxiety is being on the phone. Um, Emails coming through, imposter syndrome through Instagram, stuff like that. So I try to separate. For me, that's really critical. But I want to articulate that if you're going to do it on your phone versus writing, like, then do it on your phone. Do what's going to work for you.
Right.
Um, and then so, some other kind of like larger tactics for mental health. For me, I love going on vacation. Um, so I always need to schedule vacations or trips up to my house in New Hampshire. Um, Seeing my nephews really fills me up. So I know I need to like make dedicated time for me and them.
Mhm.
Um, I love a good spa day. So I think it's really drilling down to those extremely like, tangible things. It's instead of just being like, oh, I'm just going to walk away from my computer. I'm going to walk away from my computer and take a walk with my dog. I'm going to
Yeah,
walk away from my computer,
you you
and
have to go to something, right? It's not just like because the problem or the anxiety follows you.
yeah,
If unless you transition to a different activity or a different thought process. And,
exactly.
so I'm loving all of this. I mean, a big part of what happens to me is about anxiety as well, and
Yeah.
I can go to a dark place really fast.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I love journaling. It's how I actually got my book written about my
That's
daughter, because
awesome.
it started out as a journal, and a couple
That's
years into it, I was like,
awesome.
"Oh, yeah, this really like could be something." So
Yeah.
let's see where that goes.
I
Do you have
love
any
that.
thoughts about getting a book out?
Yeah, that is definitely the ultimate dream. And it would really be kind of a continuation of what I talk about as the mentally fit founder, those kind of things that have held me up in the past, and talking about stories so people can relate to, why did I have imposter syndrome? Here's kind of some snippets. and then some tangible tips. I'm all about the tips because
Yes.
you're fighting for people's time and attention these days. So I always want people to read something that I've written or my team's written and feel like, all right, I got something out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the book is
Yeah.
definitely on the I always joke, I'm like, I just need a little more life to happen before I feel like I have enough. So
I think you have enough. I
yeah,
think you're ready.
I probably have so much. But
So
yeah.
I definitely want to move into talking about imposter syndrome because it's not like it only impacts women, but it impacts women so much more.
Totally.
And it's really, about our confidence. I know that being an entrepreneur for me has been a double-edged sword,
Yeah,
right? I absolutely had to leave working in big environments because it wasn't good and healthy for me, and I was like
exactly.
square peg round hole. Um,
I always say that about myself too.
so much. I mean, like I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
I'm the weird person. I'm the weirdo. Like I just like people can't figure me out. My clients love me, but it's
All
that
that matters.
organizational, relational
Yeah.
stuff is tough. And
Yeah, yeah.
you know, um, I had somebody say to me, doesn't play well with others. And I was
Oh
like,
no.
really? That's
That
me?
feels really off from the little, the few minutes that I've gotten to know you outside of this podcast. That's tough. I have to say that that's tough to hear as an anxious person because you must have then been ruminating about all the things like you could have done for someone to say that,
Yes,
or
exactly. How many people don't like me in this huge organization? And, your
oh,
head goes to this the worst place.
a
And
dark
like,
place.
how
Yeah.
can I go there every day knowing that these people don't like me and that they think I'm odd and, that I'm not nice. And
Oh
I
gosh.
I thought I was like the nicest person on the planet. And I try so hard every day. It's so hard sometimes to be me,
Yeah, yeah.
you
It's
know? And
and
I don't think people get it, right?
yeah.
So
I think that people that have kind of more internal struggles have a lot harder time of kind of justifying or explaining themselves. So I completely understand what you're saying.
I had this really interesting conversation with an employee one time, and it was very eye-opening for both of us, where you know, this person had a child, almost an adult child now, with similar diagnoses to me,
Oh,
ADD and
interesting.
some other things going on, and was very frustrated with me in the communications, relational, etc. And we just were kind of like not getting each other. And I
Oh,
said,
tough.
think about me and communicating with me the way that you would hope somebody would communicate with your child.
Oh, nice.
And that was eye opening for me because it gave me something to kind of share with her
Mhm.
that was helpful information. And it was also the first time that I said, like, I might be, in charge and be the leader, but I'm not perfect. And like, you have to take into consideration how I work as much as I take into consideration how you work. And
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
was such a great conversation, but so scary to
Hmm.
have, right?
Yeah.
Because I think I've always felt like, and so many women I know have felt this way, that you have to be so tough on the outside. You can't let anything in. You can't talk about these things, not to your clients, not to your
Yeah.
staff, not to your community. So, imposter syndrome. Oh my God. Help.
Yeah.
Like, give us your tips, Lauren, because you struggle with
I
this,
know.
but
Oh my gosh.
you're
Um,
you're overcoming it. You're moving through it. Like, help us, please.
well, the one thing that I want to say before I even dive into anything is like, I still deal with it. I've come a long, long way and I feel pretty confident on most days, but there are days where I just look at, I'm like, what am I doing? And I struggle with that too. So even if you kind of overcome the imposter syndrome on the whole, just know that it's totally normal to fall back into old habits. The brain is a tricky little beast, and it's, sometimes your mind automatically goes to those old thoughts of like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good. I don't know what I'm doing. But I will say this, the one thing that kind of shifted when I first started, somebody told me, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know like 30% more than your client.
Mm,
And that really shifted, because here I was trying to be, like the next marketer of the year. And I really just, my skill set was just so unique and different. Um, I was taking all these online classes, I got certifications, and I was still like, oh, I don't like, I kept thinking in my head, I, have 15 years of corporate experience in a variety of things. It all kind of, the overarching theme is marketing communications. But I kept saying to myself, oh, but Lauren, you don't have 20 years in a marketing specific role. And that's what people are looking for. I just kept telling myself that. And then this person said that to me, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know 30% more. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right.
yeah,
So thinking of that always, helps me and like, brings me back to reality. But then once you kind of get into the focus of feeling like an expert and knowing that you do know all the things, it's also just remembering that, when someone comes to question you, it's just remembering, I am the expert. They may be pushing back and pushing back hard, but I've spent the last few years building this business. I do know what I'm doing.
for
Um,
sure. Yeah.
so reminding yourself of those things. And it just doing it scared, just being scared and doing it anyways. I think that I've spent a lot of my life just doing things scared, and I have definitely been through phases of my life where I have crippling anxiety. But I think a lot of times I am just the type of person that I don't like to let other people or myself down. So I just do a lot of things really scared. And then I'm like, oh, it wasn't that bad. What was I so worried about? So once you just do it scared and then you kind of get over it, you realize how powerful you are. I think that is, I
Oh,
always self-reflect and I'm like, oh wow, like I could do
that's
that.
cool.
And I think part of getting over that kind of imposter syndrome is being part of communities. So you can have people to bounce ideas off of and tell
Mhm.
you that you are way overthinking something, or you're here's how this played out with a client of mine, just so you can feel better. um and I'm part of the Women's Business League, I'm part of Chronic Boss, part of a ton of online communities. On Facebook especially is a great place for that. And there are communities, if you are listening to this and you are, in a corporate role and trying to figure out how to overcome imposter syndrome, there's a community for you. And I think that has really been the key for me, is like
Mhm.
finding your people.
I love that because that's really helped me too. And, there's three different places I think that I get support. There's therapeutic support,
Yes,
there's
yes,
coaching
yep,
support, coaching and mentoring, and then there's community where it's
exactly.
like peer to peer. And um so chronic boss, that's community, that's peer to
Yep,
peer. And then, people often confuse the difference between um therapy and coaching. And, I really like people in this position as an entrepreneur who struggle with whether it's mental illness or chronic issues, medical issues, anything like that. The coaching piece is also significant.
yeah.
And you don't need to coach like throughout your entire career, but there are places that people get stuck and could really use help getting through it. So
Yeah.
have you done any coaching?
Oh yes, I am like the queen of all that. I think one of the biggest things that helped me also get over the imposter syndrome and just kind of the hurdles of being an entrepreneur with anxiety and depression is leaning on help. I do outsource a lot of things so I don't feel overwhelmed. But the one thing that I did do that I recommend anybody starting a business is investing in yourself and investing in a business coach. I invested in her name's Amy Posick. She owns Bold Moves, and it is perfect for a woman that is growing her career, her business, and has that imposter syndrome, because as much as it is business coaching, she also just has this beautiful way of raising your confidence and helping you see your true power. So I think really, looking for a coach that has that ability to draw that out in you
Yeah.
is really important. So definitely working with coach, but at the same rate, knowing a coach is not a therapist.
Right.
I am not going to go to Amy, or I've worked with some other wonderful coaches too. I'm not going to go to any of those people for very specific kind of internal thoughts and that kind of CBT work. I'm going to go to my therapist for that.
Right.
And that's an important kind of difference to know is, a coach really helps you with what you have, what you're working with. And then a therapist really helps you process and is kind of looking at your past and
Yeah.
help you kind of get behind the reasons why things have happened or whatnot.
Right. You're right. Your therapist is going to help you find that why and work through some of those scary things and give you tools. And your coach is going to help you set goals and action steps and then hold you accountable to them.
Exactly.
So help you move forward on that, game board of life, if you will.
Exactly.
And I love it. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs dealing with extra, um, it can be helpful to have both at different times. It's a tool that I've used, and I'm so happy to hear that you've used it too.
Yeah, yeah, it's worth it to invest in yourself for sure.
I'm specifically working with a coach who helps me with my confidence as well. Like, and I
Yeah.
still go through these things. So I've started my own community
I love
in the
that.
disability world. And, I say things like, well, who would pay for this? You know, and yet people are paying for it,
People will
right?
pay for it. They
Like
absolutely will.
what do I really offer? It takes a minute to hit that reset button,
Yeah.
and you got to go through that. And I do a lot of stuff with checklists. I know I say
Mm.
that a lot on this podcast, but it reassures me that I am making progress
Yeah.
and that I'm not stuck, because my
Yeah.
biggest fear is just getting stuck.
Yeah,
Getting
exactly. If you got to keep growing. And I think that's every entrepreneur that is successful, that's what they have, is that desire to keep growing. But when you are dealing with chronic conditions or, a disability or mental health issues, it is sometimes hard to determine the line of like what's pushing myself to do better and what's just simply pushing myself. And
Mhm.
I would say that that's probably a line that any entrepreneur has to deal with. It is just a much harder line to decipher when you are dealing with a disability or a condition.
Right. That's very profound actually. Um, okay. So I'm winding down here.
Love it. It's been perfect.
So as usual, I love these conversations that I have, and I always, run short of time, never get to everything that I want to talk about. But I think really I would love to hear your tips for someone who is feeling like they're not in the right place in their
Yeah.
career. If they're in a corporate job, or even if they've started a business and things aren't going well and they really need to take stock and figure out, what's the next move.
Yeah.
Because that was something that you did successfully, and many of the Chronic Boss Collective members have been in this position. What advice could you give to somebody who's dealing with mental illness or chronic illnesses, who feels like they're square peg, round hole? How do they get
Yeah.
started figuring out what to do next?
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge that I think a lot of people would answer that question and say, listen to your gut. The problem is when you have anxiety, your gut's always giving the red light flashing signs. Um, and I do think that that is part of what held me back a little bit is, when you have anxiety and depression and other kind of mood disorders and anything in the mental illness realm, your internal kind of cues are naturally always on and always in overdrive.
Yes.
So to say, listen to your gut, yes, but also recognize that that looks different when you are that round, square peg and round hole. So just acknowledging that is first and foremost, recognizing I don't think like the average person, although that's a whole other story, everybody thinks differently. But so I need to do what's going to work for me. So
Right.
really pushing back if, I heard from so when the first thing that I did when I started to feel like, oh God, what am I doing with my life? I started having a lot of conversations with people in the field, people in my network. And sometimes the advice was great, but sometimes the advice was just not for me. And that's okay. I think taking those steps to talk to people in your world, whether it's your family and friends, but dig into your professional network, dig into people. And you don't even have to say like, I'm not happy, or you can just say like, I'm just trying to figure out my career. You can keep it very simple. But I think I always went into it walking away thinking, okay, well, I want to walk away with something from this conversation. So always bearing that in mind, but also remembering like this person doesn't have my life. They may make this suggestion and it's a terrible suggestion for me. So just knowing that not everybody is going to have all the answers, but definitely opening up those conversations, talking to people, recognizing too that, when I did this, people did not take mental health breaks. It was only 5 years ago, but it was just not a thing. I was very embarrassed. I called it a realignment. But
Mhm.
looking back, obviously I had to take a mental health break. Um, but recognizing that in the last 5 years, times have changed. It is absolutely okay. Obviously, if you can afford it, don't do this if if it's not in your capacity, but it's totally okay to take the time off, to take a few months off and really get your head on straight and figure out what's going on, to spend your days journaling and
Mm.
interviewing and talking with a therapist and meeting a career coach and really using those tools to help you. I think that is something we're getting there, but still, people hesitate, like, oh, I don't want to break on my resume. No, it's really okay to do that. I think people are much more accepting. Um,
Do you feel that employers, like especially bigger employers, are more accepting and, you know,
Yeah, I think so, especially, after everything that happened with COVID, people were taking breaks all the time and they had absolutely no choice. So I think if any employer, first of all, that's the other thing, if any employer is going to say, oh, why'd you take 6 months off out of, how long do people work in this world? People work for 50 years. If
yeah,
someone's going to comment about 6 months off in the whole trajectory of your career, that's probably not a great place for you to work.
yeah.
So bearing that in mind, and that's another cue too, is not only are you looking for your next career, your next entrepreneurial opportunity, that makes sense financially, but your mental health, your physical health, it also needs to be a huge part of that. So you're not just looking for a salary or a dollar amount or benefits. You're looking for, does this company, is this work that I've set up for myself make sense for the conditions that I have? If I've set myself up at a place that needs coverage from 10 to 6 every day and I have a mobility issue, I'm setting myself up for failure. So really outlining what's the environment, what's the money, and what's the kind of skills that is going to give
Mm.
me all the pieces that make me the most successful and thriving person. And that's okay if it doesn't look like a traditional job. It doesn't look like a 9 to 5 at your desk. That's really
Right.
okay. Maybe it's 20 hours a week, and maybe it is, something really unique. Maybe it's writing, maybe it's consulting for something really special. That's okay. You just got to figure out a way to make it work. And that's where a business coach would come in, or a
Yeah.
career coach.
And if you have more profound disabilities, there's a number of opportunities to work with job coaches and to work with organizations that are welcoming to
Uh,
you.
yeah,
And in Massachusetts, we have the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. There's a government organization that works on jobs, for people with disabilities and illness, in every state. And so it's important to seek out those resources so that you're not walking this path alone. And
exactly.
they will know the employers who are friendly
Yeah,
to your unique skill set and your gifts that you have to offer. So
exactly.
in closing, thank you for everything you do for all of
Oh,
us
thank
out there
you.
who have sort of been hiding behind the curtain for a
Yep.
long time. I am so happy to know you, and
Oh, thank
I'm really
you.
excited to be part of CBC, and I hope that people will check it out if you're in the same position that Lauren and I are, or if you know someone that could
Yeah,
benefit, and support your friends and your family members out there who are struggling. Um, don't make them suffer in the dark. Let's shine a
exactly.
light on the
Exactly.
human condition because that's all that it is the
Yeah.
human condition.
Mental
I don't
health
want to
is health.
I don't want to make light of, you know, what our struggles are, but really we're all different and we all face unique challenges. And the more accepting we can be and supportive we can be with each other, the most wonderful world will come of all of that. So
Exactly.
okay, so Lauren, thank you again for being
Thank
on the show.
you.
I love it. Lauren's doing some LinkedIn lives and she's toying
Yeah.
around with the idea of like launching a podcast, and
Yeah.
I think she should do it because
Oh, thank
she's got a
you.
lot to say and a lot of stories to tell, and I couldn't even scratch the surface in this 40-minute episode here. But reach out to Lauren. She is so prolific and really wants to connect with you.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate what you do as well.
Thank you. I know.